Barbara Ireland had a near-death experience. I believe that any individual who has a near-death experience and returns with a memory, information, and frequently guidance or teaching is uniquely meant for that person. As you can see, many of us have shared it, and it connects with many others, but it's so beautifully made for that person in their life. It was certainly my case. Mine started before singing. I was pursuing a singing and music career. My lifelong passion was music, and I was touring with Pearl Jam guitarist Stone Gossard in a band. I saw a man in the audience standing in front of me, loathing our concert, while we were on stage in Brooklyn having fun. His verbality was evident even without words. Big guy, can't miss him, in front of me, crossing his arms and not into it. At first, I thought, oh, we're playing badly, or we had a few different people on stage with us, and I thought, he's not liking that. Then I thought, wait a minute, he doesn't like my singing. He doesn't like my singing. It was fascinating to see. First, there will be those who don't enjoy your presentation, but I was hooked on this man and couldn't stop thinking about him. I thought, who really cares? There's hundreds of people that are enjoying it. But I hooked in, and as soon as I got these negative thoughts about our band, this and that, and then they landed on me, I started thinking how bad a singer I am, how I'll forget the lyrics, and how calm I'm even on stage with Stone. What's happening? That was when I heard this wild torrent of negative thinking for the first time. I was repeating harsh things to myself. I was lying in bed that night thinking about this, especially the cruel things I was saying to myself. If you listen in your head for a moment, you'll hear yourself moaning about doing something incorrectly, being late, being clumsy, or, oh, you're doing that again, or other old things play in our heads. I heard these, but there were so many that night that I thought, I need to get rid of them. They're clearly not healthy for me. They're not making my life any happier. What am I going to do? I thought I would sign up for a boot camp where you face fears, develop courage, and overcome boundaries every day. That'll do. While sleeping at home after the tour, I researched and signed up for one. This boot camp begins months later. I invited my best pal along. I was lucky my pal was there. It was hard every day. I signed a non-disclosure document, so I can't say but high things. Blindfolds, fire, and scary individuals jumped out to freak you out and help you with life's scary stuff. At least for me, it was horrific. Just saying, I wouldn't suggest the camp. To avoid dehydration when camping in tents, I ate a lot of food and drank a lot of water every day. We slept poorly. 3 hours of sleep per night for a week. The final day was a timed endurance activity in the sun, so you couldn't dally, but it took hours. My body started acting strangely halfway through. I started feeling shaky in my legs and hearing a strange, echoey sound, so I felt I was dehydrated and needed to drink more water. I drank more water. As we returned to the starting line, these visual contortions became more dramatic and alarming, until there were streamers on everything and I couldn't understand my partner. She'd say, "What's happening?" in a distorted voice, yet I could hear someone far away as if they were next to me. I finished it by the time we returned, and people were visually strobing at the starting line, which worried me. I said, "Please get me a medic, I think I'm going to faint." I did feel faint, so I sat down on the ground in this woods and waited for a long time. Finally, the person came back and said, "Oh, they said to just sit down, you'll be fine." Maybe they said that because there was no medic at this camp, which blows my mind. I'm pleased their medic was lovely because he wasn't a doctor. Electrolytes were given, but he took blood pressure and other things, and his face would flush every time. Be more scared afterward. My friend discovered me and questioned, "What happened to you?" We subsequently learned that my complexion was gray, I had black circles under my eyes, and my eyes were vacant and out of focus. I had heat stroke and electrolytes helped. I drank a lot of water because it was hot, yet heat stroke has comparable symptoms to a stroke. My senses were tangled because of that. But more importantly for my body was hyponatremia, which occurs when you wash too much sodium out of your blood. Sweating too much, like I did all week, or drinking too much water can cause this. In addition, I later discovered that my body doesn't hold much sodium. I must consume loads of salt. I had heat stroke and hyponatremia, which may kill, going on at once. And this kind but so-called medic said, "Well, let's take you back to your tent and have you lie down." So we did. I lay under this beautiful tree I adored because my tent was too hot. I almost cried thinking about the tree because I felt like she was watching out for me. I lay there with my friend clutching my hand. First my leg went numb and then disappeared, which was alarming. I shouted about my leg to my pal. It happened to my other leg too. Then one arm and another. Now I felt like a body and head stuck under this tree, feeling vulnerable and scared. And I'm crying like never before. I felt air exciting my head. After reading enough spiritual books, I knew that when individuals die, their life energy left their head, which scared me to death. Not dying was my plan. I was in a distant place without cell phones, and no one thought they'd die. I was healthy. My grandma lived to 104, and my great-grandfather to 106. Therefore, I shouldn't die that day. I felt afraid. Then a movie started playing. With my eyes closed, it was a combo, not a recollection, yet memories sometimes appear like films. Instead of blurry and in and out like a recollection, it was crystal clear. I felt like I was seeing a movie, reliving a band rehearsal 2 weeks previously. In another band, my brother and I argued about something. My perception of these movies was that I was in them and saw them, and it's hard to express the difference, but I felt everything. I felt the moment as it happened to me, but I also watched it like a movie. During our debate, the movie froze on one frame. I was furious, and a voice arrived from nowhere. It wasn't my regular inner conversation voice, but I could hear it. A calm, compassionate masculine voice asked, "What were you thinking at that moment?" That stunned me enough to stop worrying about my legs and everything. I was wondering, what was I thinking? Until I remembered and spoke it. After I answered, the tiny video ended and a new one started. This time, I raised an eyebrow when the freeze frame occurred, and the voice asked, "What were you thinking right then?" I replied. It happened again, afresh. This time, I looked down during conversation freeze framing. "What were you thinking when you lowered your head?" I said. This lasted hours. These were repetitions of events from my adulthood, not childhood, and they spanned years and many connections and relationships. My thoughts were specific to each moment. I lied a few times because I didn't want to admit I judged someone or wanted to be kind. The voice knew the answer and would pause and ask, "Are you sure about that?" It was kind and non-judgmental, but it made me reconsider. By saying, "Well, actually, no, I was actually thinking blah, blah, blah," the question would disappear and a new movie would start. This lasted several hours while my skull deflated. After 3 hours, I felt weaker and less focused on my body since I was leaving it. The movie stopped. There was a blank screen, and the voice stated, "Barbara, you have a choice now. Would you like to stay or go?" I knew what it meant. I may choose to stay on Earth as a human or leave. I'm only crying because I finally experienced the other side. I had one foot in and one out. I wasn't completely gone, but I was close. What was on the other side eliminated death fear. Moment of death, not dying process. I have no fear because I've never experienced this kind of love here. As if the space around everything is formed of love molecules, like the air. It's everywhere, everything, and its composition. So you're in love. We don't have it here, so I can't explain. The entire side was non-judgmental, non-critical, forgiving, friendly, consoling, and helpful. Everything we value about healthy connections and kindness in ourselves and others was there 1,000-fold. I was leaning to go when I was given the decision to stay or go because it's nice and intriguing, but I had relationships here. In addition to relationships and unfinished business, I liked being alive. I had to weigh my love of food, moving, nature, reading, and creating. I started asking questions, which were humorous from a humble perspective because I was mostly inquiring about my projects, half-finished albums, screenplays that weren't made into movies, and other writings. I responded, "Well, what about all those? They're not done." The guide said, "Well, Barbara, those really don't matter that much. I find it funny because life objectives matter to everybody who has them." But the guide said, "What really matters are your connections with other people, your relationships. If your projects connect you with them, connect them with themselves, connect them with other people, open something new within them, their heart or their mind. then yes, they're worth a lot. And even if you don't have it, okay, well, it's fun, that's great, but it's not that big a deal. But if they are connecting, then it's worth a lot. I chose, okay, I would like to come back to my body. The voice said, okay, if you go back, you have to contact these 4 people. 3 of them you have to see in that week, tell them about your experience, and tell them these various things. For instance, how much I love the person. It's not just, hey, I love you, just wanted you to know. It's like a really big deal. When that was done, the whole other side collapsed from my experience. That puffy air started reversing its direction, going back into my body. My limbs started coming back to life, and I was fully back in my body within minutes. I opened my eyes, and it was like watching opening your eyes to a world that was so transformed because it was so extraordinarily beautiful. I think this world is probably equal parts difficult, and I opened my eyes and saw the tree, my friend, and her with the sun that had gone down a lot and was now this golden auburn color. A big fat bee bumbling around a flower, the grass color, the smells, and the sound of a lecture far off. It just blew my mind what we get to experience here. After a month, I started hearing those mean thoughts again. Some were mean, but I'd say most were worries. Like that night when I was performing with Stone. I was worried I wasn't going to hit a note. I'd forget my lyrics. I wasn't good enough to be on stage. I shouldn't even be a singer. I stopped listening to music, tasting my food, and smelling every flower on walks. I became more normal. But when I heard those negative ideas come back, I was upset. I sat down and thought, wait a minute. The hours I watched those little flicks and was asked, what were you thinking? Common denominator, and then I realized it was the same question, more or less for the entire time. It was all about what I was thinking. And it was trying to show me, this guide was trying to connect for me a very simple thing. Maybe all of us know, maybe we don't, or at least we're not very conscious of it. I don't think what we're thinking has a total connection with what's happening and it was showing me this connection between negative thinking and the outer world and how they're dancing with each other in a way that was causing me a hell of a lot of harm and suffering. I studied neuroscience, cellular biology, which is a lot about how we feel about things, which is also connected to our thoughts. I studied spiritual traditions on this from a lot of different angles for 3 years solid, from a layperson's standpoint anyway, but I gained a lot of knowledge, and I practiced all sorts of different techniques on myself. And slowly, I noticed my happiness started raising. My happiness started being more regular instead of up and down, and the worries started evening out. My thoughts were much kinder to myself. I was a kinder person to myself and others. And slowly, money started shifting, energy started shifting, relationships started healing really fast. And I thought, okay, there's something really big to this. And after about 3 years, I had really settled on a method I was using for myself. I call it the de-looping method because what I discovered is there are 2 kinds of negative thoughts. One is a negative thought that comes into our head. We can't control what we think, but we can control whether we're going to grasp onto that and chew it. When negative thoughts come in, are we going to grasp it or let it go? I was grasping a lot, and what I call looping on thoughts, especially worries, and I couldn't stop the loop. It's like when you get a stupid song stuck in your head and you just can't stop it. Well, I figured out how to stop those songs. You replace them with a different song, and very soon the first song's going to go away. You can't push it away. You can't push negative thoughts away. The more you push on those things, the stronger they get. What you resist persists. Fully connects here. And what I realized is there is a glass ceiling to joy, and the only thing holding us back is how we are perceiving what's happening out there. That's just happening, but are we going to take it in and contort it and make it into this big disaster in our minds that we're going to loop on? The second we do that, negative emotions start. Negative behaviors start. We start going downhill, and it goes bad. So I've learned to basically interrupt the loop. I can't stop the negative thought, but I can stop myself from looping on this thing, from hooking in. If we can't hear what we're saying in our heads, we can't do a thing about it. It's just going to run our lives like it did mine when I'm on stage, and all these thoughts are bombarding. And I thought, having all those all the time, I just don't know it. Well, the answer was yes. Carl Jung said this amazing thing. Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life, and we will just call it fate. That's more or less the quote. Until we make the unconscious conscious, these negative thoughts are going to direct our life, and we're just going to call it fate. But what if we make them conscious, and then we unhook from these negative thoughts, these worst-case scenarios, these resentments, these jealousies, these anxieties, this self-doubt? What happens if you unhook from the loop of self-doubt? Can you imagine what could be possible for every single person when they start unhooking from that and bringing in thoughts that are helping them and releasing the pockets of negative energy that are left over from these thoughts that get stored in the body? When those start going, when they start healing, there's room for true miracles to start happening. I feel like this near-death experience was a true miracle for me. So information about the de-looping method and my book, they're in the description. And I wish anyone watching this to just take this one thing away. Just start listening to what is being said in your head. First thing, when you wake up or while you're on the phone with someone you know that kind of triggers you, listen to the things your mind starts telling you. Or if you're about to give a presentation or you're called into your boss's office, what are you saying in your head before you go in? Just notice these things because those are our clues about where we can heal ourselves, where we can start de-looping, and where we can start gaining a whole lot more joy.